The human walked through the gates of Velshera like he owned the silence that followed him. No announcement. No diplomatic cortege. No flag bearing his world's colors. Just a man in worn travel clothes, carrying a single bag, moving through the outer market district of the capital with the unhurried certainty of someone who had been here before. The gate sentinels logged his entry, biometric scan, trace chemical analysis, gravitational mass profile, and flagged nothing. He was unarmed. His papers were in order. His travel record showed 17 planetary visits in the past 6 years, all trade-related, all routine. Sentinel Commander Varek watched the feed anyway. Something about the way the man moved made the old instinct fire in the back of his skull. Not threat movement. Not the coiled readiness of someone preparing violence. Something older. The way he turned his head at the sound of children playing in the eastern courtyard, not toward the sound, but away from it, like a man forcing himself not to look at something precious. The way his jaw set when the palace spire came into view above the market rooftops. Recognition. Memory. Grief, maybe. Varek pulled the file. James Calloway. Human. 34 standard years. Former xenobiological research contractor, last employed by a private trade consortium 8 years ago. No current employer of record. Reason for visit to Velshera, cultural tourism. Varek read it twice. Then, he cued his second channel and spoke quietly. Enter watch. We have a flag. Gate entry, human male, lone traveler. I want eyes on him from the market through the palace district. Soft shadow. Do not engage unless he moves toward a restricted zone. Understood, Commander. Designation? Varek looked at the man's face on the feed. Tired eyes. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. Call him Ghost. Ghost moved through the market without buying anything. That alone was unusual. The Velcheron outer market existed precisely to slow visitors down, a deliberate cultural buffer designed to absorb the foreign and the curious before they came within sight of the inner palace. Colorful stalls. Extraordinary food. Artisans whose work drew collectors from 40 systems. Most visitors spent hours there. Ghost walked through in 11 minutes, eyes forward, not browsing, not pausing, only slowing once, when an elderly Velcheron vendor called out to him in the old dialect. Ghost answered her. Not in trade standard. Not in the simplified greeting script every tourist downloaded before arriving. In old Velcheron. High form. The kind spoken inside the palace walls. The vendor stared at him. He inclined his head respectfully and kept moving. In the monitoring center, Varek straightened in his seat. Where did he learn that? His second murmured beside him. Varek didn't answer. He was already running a deeper search, cross-referencing Calloway's name against palace records, academic institutions, any diplomatic channel that touched Velshera in the past decade. Nothing came back clean. The records were there, but they had the texture of something that had been handled. Smoothed. Like a stone that had been in a river too long. Someone had touched this file before him. Ghost reached the inner plaza and stopped. He stood at the base of the great ceremonial fountain, the one that had run dry 6 years ago, that the Queen had ordered sealed after the loss, and he looked at it for a long moment. Not like a tourist. Like someone standing at a grave. Then he sat down on the fountain's edge, put his bag between his feet, and waited. Varek's calm crackled. Commander, inner courtyard is reporting an unscheduled movement. From where? A pause that lasted exactly 1 second too long. The princess's wing, sir. Princess Saya was 6 years old and had never once in her life done anything she was told the first time. This was documented. Her tutors had files on it. The household staff had informal agreements about rotation schedules specifically designed to manage it. Even the queen, whose word was constitutional law on 12 inhabited systems, had learned to phrase requests to her daughter as questions, because a command simply bounced off the child like light off still water. But today Saya was not being disobedient. Today she was being quiet. That was worse. Her attendant, Marin, noticed it during the midday lesson, the moment Saya stopped fidgeting and went very still, her large amber eyes fixed on the window that faced the inner plaza. Marin followed her gaze. A man was sitting at the dry fountain. A human. "Your Highness," Marin said carefully. "Lesson time is not yet. I know him," Saya said. Her voice was a child's voice. Small. Certain. Marin felt something cold move through her, though she couldn't have explained why. "You cannot know him, Your Highness. You have never. I know his smell." Saya turned from the window and looked at Marin with those old, unreadable eyes that sometimes made the staff forget she was a child at all. "From before. When I was very small." Marin made the correct decision and called the commander's office immediately. Then she turned back to find the princess already at the door. She was fast. Marin had always known she was fast, but she had never seen Saya run. Varric reached the inner corridor in time to see the small figure in pale blue silk racing toward the plaza entrance with 3 attendants behind her, and none of them catching up. He stepped into her path. She didn't slow. He dropped to one knee and caught her gently by the shoulders, bringing her to a controlled stop. "Princess." His voice was level. "Tell me." Saya looked up at him. Her eyes were full, not with tears, not yet, but with something that looked like the moment before a storm decides what it's going to be. "The human at the fountain," she whispered. "I need to see him." "Why?" She hesitated. And in that hesitation, Varric saw something that made the instinct fire again, harder this time. Not threat. Not danger in the conventional sense. Something that would change things. Something that, once it happened, could not unhappen. "Because I remember him," she said. "And I think he came back for us." Varric did not let her go. Not immediately. That was not how he operated. He walked with her, one hand resting lightly near her shoulder, close enough to guide, far enough to be respectful, while his inner team maintained a loose perimeter around the plaza. Ghost hadn't moved. He sat with the same stillness he'd carried through the market, his bag at his feet, watching the fountain's dry basin as if it might tell him something. Varric studied him from the archway. The man's hands were resting open on his knees. That was deliberate, a posture anyone trained in cross-cultural protocol would recognize as non-threatening. He wasn't checking a device. Wasn't scanning the area. He was simply waiting, in the way of someone who had practiced waiting for a very long time. "How long has he been sitting there?" Varric asked without raising his voice. 41 minutes, Commander." Saya made a small sound beside him. He glanced down. She was gripping the fabric of her sleeve in both hands, twisting it, which was the thing she did when she was containing something large. "Your Highness." "Look at me." She looked. "Tell me everything you remember. Every detail. Do not leave anything out because you think it doesn't matter. In moments like this, everything matters." She was 6. He didn't speak to her like she was 6. "He used to come to the garden," she said. "The lower garden, near the water moss wall. I was very small. I couldn't walk properly yet. He would sit with—" She stopped. Swallowed. "He would sit with her. With Mama. They would talk for a long time. I would fall asleep and, when I woke up, he was always still there. He smelled like cold air and something sweet. I never learned the word for it. Vanilla, Varric thought, identifying it from the file's trace chemical profile. The man's jacket had tested positive for vanilla extract on entry scan. Baking. A human domestic habit. Did your mother ever speak his name to you? Saya shook her head slowly. Then quieter. But she cried when he left. I saw her from the window. She stood in the garden after he was gone, and she was very still for a long time, like the palace when the bells stop. Varric breathed out through his nose. He made his decision. Stay here, he told Saya. Do not move from this archway. Marin, stand with her. Then he walked into the plaza alone. Ghost heard him coming and didn't turn. He waited until Varric's footsteps stopped 5 feet away, and then he looked up, calm, unhurried, with the expression of someone who had been expecting exactly this. Sentinel Commander, he said, reading the insignia correctly. His Velcheron was accented but grammatically clean. You've been sitting here 43 minutes, Varric said. I didn't want to approach without being seen first. I thought it was the correct way. It was. Varric studied him. Your file says cultural tourism. I needed a reason they'd log without flagging. You flagged anyway. The man, Calloway, almost smiled. I expected to. Varric let the silence sit for a moment. Then, what do you want? Calloway looked back at the dry fountain. 6 years ago this ran. The basin was full. There were flowers planted along the south edge. I don't know their name in your language. Small, blue, with a white center. Velmora, Varric said. They were the queen's. She had them removed. I know. Calloway's voice didn't break, but it compressed slightly, the way a strong structure sounds when weight is applied. I've been trying to come back for 4 years. There was always a reason it wasn't the right time. Political tension, trade disputes, my own cowardice. He paused. I have something that belongs here. Something I should have left behind when I went. What is it? Calloway reached into his bag slowly, movements deliberate and visible, and withdrew a small sealed container. Inside, clearly visible through the transparent material, were seeds. Small, pale blue. Velmora seeds. Varric stared at them. She gave them to me, Calloway said quietly. The last day. I don't know if she meant for me to keep them or to bring them back. I've thought about it for 6 years and I still don't know. He held the container in both hands, looking down at it. But I think the not knowing was the cowardice talking. From the archway, Varric heard a small sound. He didn't look back. He kept his eyes on Calloway. There is a child, he said carefully, who says she remembers you. Calloway went very still. She says you used to sit in the lower garden. Something moved through the man's face, a wave of something enormous that he held back with visible effort, his jaw tight, his eyes suddenly bright. How old is she? He asked, and his voice was barely a sound. 6 years and 4 months. The math was not complicated. Calloway closed his eyes. He stayed like that for 3 full seconds. When he opened them, they were wet but steady. I didn't know, he said. When I left, I didn't know. Varric turned then, just enough to look back at the archway. Saya was still standing where he'd left her. Marin's hand was on her shoulder. But Saya wasn't looking at Varric. She was looking at the man on the fountain. Varric watched her face and saw the moment recognition became certainty, the way a child's expression moves when something their body already knew finally arrives in their mind as language. Her lips parted. She said something too quiet to carry across the plaza. But Marin heard it. And Varric saw Marin's face change. He turned back to Calloway in time to see the man looking toward the archway, and he watched something ancient and ruinous move through that tired face. Hope, the kind that has survived a long time without being fed. Varric stepped aside. He did not give permission. He did not announce anything. He simply stepped aside, which in Velcheron protocol meant, proceed, and whatever happens next is beyond my authority to stop. Saya walked forward. Not running this time. Walking, because she was a princess, and she understood the weight of moments, even at 6 years old. Each step deliberate. Her hands at her sides. Her amber eyes fixed on the man who was now standing, very slowly, as if his legs weren't certain they'd hold him. She stopped 3 feet away. She looked up at him. He looked down at her. Then she whispered, so quietly that only he could hear, "Mama said you would come back. She said I should not ask when." Calloway lowered himself to one knee on the ancient stones of the inner plaza. His voice, when it came, was wrecked and whole at the same time. "I should have come sooner." Saya reached out and put her small hand against his cheek. He closed his eyes. In the palace above, in the great reception hall, where the queen was meeting with 3 trade ministers, her senior aide entered through the side door. He crossed the room without acknowledging the ministers, which was a breach of protocol significant enough that everyone went quiet. He leaned down and spoke 3 words into the queen's ear. The queen did not move. She did not respond to the ministers. She did not stand or speak or signal in any way. She simply sat very still, the way the palace sounds when the bells stop, while the trade ministers looked at each other and understood that whatever was happening, their meeting was finished. Her hands, folded on the table, went white at the knuckles. Then she exhaled one long, controlled breath and stood. The aide stayed close as she walked through the side door, through the inner corridor, toward the stairs that led to the lower garden passage. She walked at full pace, not running, which was more frightening to everyone who saw her than running would have been. Her expression was carved clean of everything except the thing she was moving toward. Varric met her at the top of the plaza stairs. "Your Majesty." He stepped aside. She looked down into the plaza, saw her daughter's hand against the human's face, saw the container of Velmora seeds sitting open on the fountain's edge where Calloway had placed them while he knelt. She looked at Varric. "How long?" she asked. Her voice was perfectly controlled. "He arrived 49 minutes ago, Majesty. He sat at the fountain and waited to be seen. He made no attempt to approach the palace or contact anyone inside." "Did he say why he came?" "He said he had something that belonged here." Varric paused. "And that the not knowing was cowardice." The queen was silent for a long moment. Then, "My daughter. What did she went to him herself." "I could not have stopped her without force, Majesty, and force was not, no." The queen shook her head once. "No, it wasn't. She descended the stairs." Saya heard her first, turned, and something extraordinary happened in the child's face. Relief, vast and total, the relief of a creature who has been holding 2 separate pieces of the world apart with her small hands and has finally been allowed to let them touch. She stepped back without being asked, giving space, and stood very straight the way she stood in formal ceremony, which was the truest thing she knew how to do. Calloway heard the footsteps and rose. He turned. For a long moment no one moved. The queen stood at the base of the stairs with the afternoon light cutting long across the plaza stones, and she looked at the man who had sat at her dry fountain for nearly an hour rather than approach unannounced. The man who had carried her flowers across 6 years and multiple star systems. The man who had not known, and who had come back anyway. Her face did not break, but her hands, for the first time in 6 years, unclenched. "You look terrible," she said. Calloway exhaled something that was half laugh, half collapse. "I've been traveling a long time." "I know." She stepped forward once. "You should have come back sooner. Your daughter said the same thing." The queen's eyes moved to Saya, who was watching them both with the calm attention of a child who has understood far more than anyone told her. The queen held out her hand. Saya crossed to her and took it, and stood between them, and looked up at each of them in turn. Then she looked at Varek, standing at the top of the stairs with his hands behind his back, and she said, in the clear carrying voice she used when she intended to be heard, "I told you I knew him." Varek said nothing, but behind the discipline of his expression, something that might have been relief had lived for a moment and been carefully returned to its proper place. The queen looked at the sealed container on the fountain's edge. She walked to it slowly and picked it up, held it in both hands, the way you hold something you had stopped expecting to see again. "The south wall," she said quietly. "They were always best along the south wall." "I remember," Calloway said. She looked at him. He looked back. Saya, still holding her mother's hand, reached out with her other hand and found his and held it. The three of them stood at the dry fountain in the late light, the Velmora seeds in the queen's hands, and the plaza around them was absolutely quiet, the quiet of a held breath, of a long tension finally given permission to release. Varek would write in his report that nothing extraordinary had occurred, that a traveler had been processed, escorted, and received, that protocol had been followed at every step. He would not write about the way the queen's shoulders finally dropped. He would not write about the child who had run when no one could stop her, because she had known something her mother had carried alone for 6 years. He would not write about the seeds. Some things belong to the people who live them, and to no record at all.